I'm very well, thank you, Anton.
Barry,
That was very nice.
Well, it's all true. And you sort of forget when you begin to look back through the back catalogue, the list of songs that you and your brothers were responsible for is extraordinary.
It really is about 40, 45 years worth of making records. There was a lot of records that did very well, and there was a lot of records that didn't do very well. So it was a fine balance, Anton.
It was 45 years in reading about it that seems relatively fractious.
Yes.
You didn't end up quite as close as you might have. There was probably as much turmoil and fighting in your relationship, at least that's what it seems from reading about it from the outside, as there was love and warmth and closeness.
It wasn't like you might envisage Oasis, for instance. I mean, we never hit each other, so there was never any of that. But we were brothers. We were quite often at odds, and there was quite often conflict. And of course, we have an older sister, Leslie. So we went through all those years with arguments and great friendships. We didn't really socialise much with each other after we became sort of famous. We didn't really. We all had our own friends, and that's how it panned out. The best times were when we were together.
There is a sort of, I suppose, an assumption when you look from the outside that you were in some way the lead of the group. I think because in a lot of the videos you would have a sort of a predominant position. You were the eldest, and really at the early stages you were very much the eldest because you were 18, 19 when the two boys were still in their very early teens. Is that a fair assumption that you were kind of the driving force or not?
Well, I think it's a better assumption that each one of us was the leader at some point in time. Being the eldest brother is sort of a role that you play, and I have four sons now, and the eldest is Stephen, and he feels that sense that he has to watch out for his brothers, and I think that you fall into that role, and I was the one who had to worry about getting paid. We had to get paid somehow. So someone had to do that, and Morris and Robin weren't really bothered about being involved in that. So in some ways, but I would say there was a leader. We never looked at each other as the leader. Look at it that way. We never saw each other as the leader of the group.
Although surely
we were three brothers.
That pressure to get paid at some point, Barry, early on, must have come away, because by the early 70s. I assume you had acquired such success that there wasn't much pressure financially.
Well, there wasn't much money either. Getting paid for doing something well is just as hard today as it ever was. And in pop groups in those days, before the 70s, were basically on a wage. So you might have got maybe £100 a week. As a member of a group, as a member of a successful group, you might have got a bit more, but usually everybody was on some kind of retainer, And then when you suddenly find yourself selling a few million records, and fame kicks in, then you go to work. You really have to worry about how you're going to get paid, and in what ways are you going to get paid? If you're a songwriter. There's publishing, and if you make records, there's record royalties. There's different kinds of royalties, and you start. It's a real education, and you have to get stuck in.
What's the experience of that level of fame like from the inside? Because there was a point where you were so ubiquitous, you and the guys in the Bee Gees, that there were even radio stations who defined themselves by saying, "Look, today we won't play any Bee Gees." I mean, that's an extraordinary degree of fame.
That's true.
Does it annoy you to some extent that you became so? I suppose you and the guys, more than any other band, suffered from the backlash against disco, because when in the early 80s when disco got turned against, you had been so synonymous with it, particularly through Saturday Night Fever, that you kind of got an awful lot of flack.
We certainly did. On reflection, yes, that's true, but on reflection, it was probably the greatest fun we ever had in our lives, the greatest fun, and the fact that we should have been forgotten and we should have been disappeared by about 1972, thinking that most groups and most artists really only have a 5-year span. We felt that by 72 we thought it was all over. So it was a fantastic period, and that led us into, once we got hit by the backlash, that led us into the period where we thought it better to write for other people, and that way try to maintain some form of credibility as songwriters.
That must be
So-
deeply
so we were
frustrating
writing
to find yourself being punished for your own success.
Well, yeah, but I think, you look at some of the most successful people, people that I admire, like Elvis Presley or Frank Sinatra. I mean, my mother never liked Frank Sinatra. I loved Frank Sinatra, I think you get both ends of the stick, Elvis got made fun of because he wore the white suit towards the very end. And Michael Jackson certainly had his own sort of people making fun of him. Towards the end, there was always it was wacko jacko, it was all kinds of stuff. You can't escape this.
Although it has to be said, I've read reason from you that Michael Jackson got some flack, because I read a report that Michael Jackson stayed in your house and that even when he was watching TV, he would continue to dress up in full costume gear.
Yeah, well, that was the victory tour. He didn't stay at the hotel. He stayed at my house, and he would sit in the kitchen and watch the TV in the kitchen of the crowds around the hotel. So, and he'd be laughing his head off, So Michael was a wonderful character. He always dressed up as if he was on stage, and later on, when he stayed with me about a year before he died, he changed completely. He changed into sort of somebody who just dressed casually. Hung around the house, watched TV, and was very, very down to earth, but very concerned about the strife he was in.
Did you ever
And
have
so
a view on the strife
yeah.
that he was in? Did you believe it? Did you think it was a myth?
I didn't believe it. I believed that kids loved him. I didn't believe that nature, the nature of this person, that would have been possible. I wouldn't have believed it. I still don't, because I knew Michael, and it just never crossed my mind that he could be that kind of person.
And even in the subsequent coverage and the subsequent court case, that view would remain the same, Barry, would it?
Yeah, because we were very close. I mean, the only other artist I ever knew that actually understood me was Michael, and we had that kind of relationship. So. It would never have crossed my mind. And the people that were his friends, were also my friends, and none of us would have felt that way.
In what way do you mean that he understood you?
Well, he was. We were both creatives, and for us, the only thing that mattered was music. The only thing that mattered, and that was the beginning and the end of everything. That and his children. And it's the same for me and my children, There's only two things important in life, and that's your family and music. And
Was that
we
the
shared
same
that.
for your brothers Morris and Robin? Because I remember reading that Robin, at one point you saying that there was a bit of a separation between yourself and Robin, where he wanted more success and more solo success, whereas you just wanted to keep making music.
I wanted to keep making music. I was getting all the attention I needed, and maybe that was the problem. That I got more attention than I perhaps deserved, and I don't think Morris and Robin liked that very much, and I wouldn't blame them. I think Robin, right from being about 15 or 16 years old, entertained the idea or the desire to be a solo star. So it's probably in most groups. But if you're brothers, it's a bit more intense. Robin really always wanted that sort of individual recognition, and why not?
And was it that?
But Morris was, Morris was like that too. We all needed attention as individuals.
You've talked a couple of times in an interview about the distance then that sort of came towards the end of both of their lives, it would seem. Was that a part of the driving force behind that, or had you just grown apart? Once
the testosterone kicks in and you reach a certain age, and you start to have a girlfriend, and then you get married, and then you have children, all of these aspects make their own way into the musical world. We all began to have families, and that if anything would have disturbed whatever the three of us had as a unit, as three brothers, as four brothers, because even Andy was married.
But it seems to have gone slightly beyond that, Barry, because you said that the way that you found out about Robin's very negative prognosis was you showed a photo to your own doctor in Miami who said, you need to go and see him, it doesn't look good.
Yes. And he told me what he thought it was, and he said, I better go and see Robin because it didn't look like he had very long. That's true. But you know, in families, if I'd have been Robin, you know, it's very possible that I wouldn't have wanted anyone to know either, you know. There's something about life where you don't really want to be an invalid. You don't want to be perceived as an invalid.
And it was cancer that took Robin, was it?
Yes, it was colon cancer, and it had spread, you know. But I don't understand why. I still don't understand why that's something that they don't want, that no one wants to talk about. And I know if anything happened to me, I'd tell everybody because I'd want people to learn from it, you know. In fact, I think the doctors were telling him off because he wouldn't go for treatment. He just, denial, I think is the word.
How do you handle that when you perform? Because presumably their presence, both Morris and Robin's, is very real, particularly when you're on stage, given how much time you spent on stage with them.
Well, it's pretty deep. I see them. I see them with me. I hear their opinions all the time. Whenever a situation goes down, I wonder what they would have thought, and that I don't think that'll ever leave me. And but the music will live, and I will make sure that it lives on. You know.
Do you sing the songs
yes,
that are associated with them?
Well, of course I do. But I only sing the songs I sang. So you know, this isn't a tribute as such. It's a celebration.
It's not like Lennon and McCartney where there's a clear delineation of who wrote which song. It's actually very hard to look at the Bee Gees' back catalogue and say, okay, which one of those is a Barry song? And if I go to see him in the O2, what'll he be singing?
Right. Whatever he sang on records are the songs he came up with. And whatever Robin sang are the songs he came up with. So it's pretty much like Lennon and McCartney, you know. You know, Run to Me is an example. Nights on Broadway is an example where we both took parts in the song, and one part of it worked for Robin and another part worked for me. It's the same thing. If I brought a song to the studio, I usually ended up singing it, and the same would happen for Robin or Morris.